questions from the audience? Maybe you can get some sleep consultation from our experts.
I've got one.
Yeah.
What does sleep do? And that's to you, Dr. Mignot. What does it accomplish?
So that's a $1 million question. Is really, we don't really know. I believe that sleep is a very complex combination of restorative process. That during the day, you push your metabolism at a higher level, and then it has to return to homeostasis. And it was more convenient for evolution to kind of bundle everything during the night. But that is actually an explanation that works only for non-REM sleep, because we know you decrease your metabolism. It has a lot of advantage for natural selection. But exactly what's happening in the body, in the brain and the body, we really don't know.
How about encoding memories?
Sorry?
Its relationship to memory.
Yes. So, there are so many theories. Yes, sleep certainly helps consolidating memory. We know that REM sleep probably increases creativity and also consolidates certain memory. We know that sleep has many functions and many positive effects. It's very important to have a healthy sleep. But which one is really has been the driver of natural selection, we really don't know. And exactly, personally, I think that every cell in the body sleeps in some ways, has to recover. And actually, you just look at yourself in a mirror when you have not slept. You just don't look, you look bad. Even your skin looks bad. So I think sleep is not just in the brain. It's a restorative process. We don't know if that restorative process is going to be like the circadian rhythm. What's remarkable is all the same gene and proteins have been found to work on every cell of the body. For sleep, we're not sure. I'm sure there is a restorative process in every cell of the body. And in fact, there is changes of genes, of many genes with sleep, in every cell of the body, including the liver. But we don't know if it's going to end up being as simple as circadian rhythm, where it's really a small set of genes that coordinates everything. That's $1 million question, and that I hope to find with my study.
So I have a very weird question. So on one hand, most people are of the opinion that you should not keep your mobile next to you when you're sleeping. It would disturb your sleep and stuff like that. And on the other hand, we have these wearables that we are trying to implant or use and just to measure sleep. So does this wearable, does it affect our sleep in some way, or does it emit some radiations that might be harmful? Or from the user perspective, I feel I'm scared to use something like this on my body while I'm sleeping or something like that.
I think maybe, Jonathan, you want to answer?
Sure. Yeah, so
the trade-off.
The trade-off, the question is, yes, the mobile device might be able to help you with some of these sleep tracking if you put it near the bed, but then also is it a distraction? I think you're wise to see that. A lot of the devices, like the Rhythm Dream and some of those, they disconnect the Bluetooth, so they know that that's a consumer, thought. Not clear that there's any evidence that shows that it actually leads to anything, but most of the good ones turn off Bluetooth, so you can feel fairly confident when you're wearing something that it's isolated. So I think that's one thing. I do think, though, that the phone itself, if you're the type of person that is just immediately checking it, then you're probably going to have less value in that. If you remember the Zeo, that's part of what I liked about it. There was just no phone involved. It was 2004, and I think that that's where things should go again. I also like, there's a few, like the Sleep Shepherd is a device that you might look at where it's just an on-off switch. It's kind of low-tech in some ways, but somehow I do think we need a little bit more low-tech so that people that do have sort of a no device in the bedroom policy, they could still take a sleep wearable and it could add value.
And to also answer you, I think you remember I mentioned these two directions. There's one direction where people think of contactless sensors, where it's actually going to be your bed, your environment, that's going to monitor you without you doing anything, which is an extension of the concept we heard in the hospital. Is really, maybe with a camera, with the sound, without touching you, the firmness of the mattress, you can actually measure breathing, and you might be able to already detect a lot of things like sleep apnea, And then you might even be able to act on it. Let's say that people have sleep apnea more on their back. Maybe you can have a sound to train people to sleep more on their side. I mean, there's a lot of different options, both with a contact sensor and without a contact sensor. It's very clear that now a lot of companies are very interested in sleep because that's one of the largest. But I want to point out that it's not just poor sleep. There's also sleep apnea, which is a big problem. I mean, for example, if you have insomnia and you don't check for sleep apnea, that's a bit of a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's.
Yes, my question is more around the device and also the behavioral health side of it. If we look at something like studying resiliency and sleep disorders, what sort of devices, or where would you point us to say this is probably as good as it gets, knowing that polysomnography is near impossible to put in a person's home? If we're looking at resiliency, what would you recommend?
Maybe the CBT, sleep.
Sure. So I'm not entirely sure I completely understand the question. So are you asking what kind of devices might be able to predict resiliency to a sleep disorder?
If we're looking at the correlation between sleep and resilience, so what sort of devices would you recommend, as knowing that polysomnography is probably impossible to put in people's homes? And also, do you know of studies of resilience in sleep?
I mean, it's a fantastic question, and it's one that I'm actually struggling to answer. I apologize for that.
I'll add my
I
perspective.
think
Since I passed the baton to you, I didn't want the question either. So I think the challenge is, in part of your question, you're talking about PSG. So you're kind of putting out there that we need some good biomarkers for resilience. And so I would agree. I think that's a challenge. I do think you'll see novel sensors. You saw a slide with Poon and Jean Bao. I've had some interactions with them. I think they're doing some fantastic work, and so I think you'll see things. Maybe it'll just be like a little Band-Aid that you'll just be able to put over your head, and that will give you really accurate readings. And sleep does need to be personalized. How much deep sleep do most people get? How much do they need? How much REM sleep do they get? How much do they need? We don't really have good indications of that, because when you go into a sleep lab, the experiment affects it itself. So that's where if we got some of these consumer devices that had some clinical validation that were mass adopted, we might learn a lot more and we might get some of those biomarkers for resilience. The reason why I did point there is Sleepio and CBT, so cognitive behavior therapy. Like it's clear that if somebody came to me and said, what device? I would say I wouldn't go a device, I would go CBT. Because that's going to help you. I remember Rafael Pelayo, when I talked to him about some of the things I was doing, I'm a self-hacker, I experiment with sleep schedules, crazy stuff, and he just looked at me and he said, people have the same sleep schedule as you, but they call it insomnia. You call it, this is amazing. And so it's mindset. And so he said, if I could change one thing for people with insomnia, I might have them change their mindset. And so that's where I think that's really not related to a device. That's just related to
Yeah, and I really actually like that point because I think I'm a little bit more traditional when it comes to cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and I'm a very big advocate of sleep diaries, which is not a device and is really getting at the subjective sleep experience. And just speaking anecdotally, when I work with patients who do have devices, whether it be a Fitbit or whatever it is that they're using, they tend to hyper-focus on the sleep parameters, and it can make treatment even a little bit harder because of that. And so, in those cases, I do like to encourage these individuals to, rather than focusing on, the objective readings of their sleep, to really focus on their subjective sleep experience and how they're feeling during the day, which I think is, just as well, is also very important.
Yeah, and I would add that, sleep is not just one disorder, so that's a problem. Is resiliency is a bit difficult to define, because is it resiliency to sleep apnea? Is it resiliency to, insomnia? I mean, we know, for example, for sure, and that I think was very well illustrated, that for insomnia contributes to depression, and there is now very nice genetic models that can address causality, and we know that insomnia cause depression, and that depression causes insomnia, and it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, if you are depressed and you start not to sleep, it becomes worse, and vice versa. If you don't sleep, you start to worry about things, etc. So in that respect, certainly for insomnia, you don't need an EEG or device to measure it. Most of it is really like behavioral, and it has been shown to have very positive effect on mental health in general. But now you should not forget that there's not only insomnia. People may have insomnia and sleep apnea. It's super common. It's 20% of the population. So people may snore and they may try to sleep as much as they can, but their sleep is never restorative. And then, they end up with a stroke. That's a completely different problem. It's a different type of resiliency. And then you need maybe a device is helpful for screening, at least knowing if you have the problem. So I think it's going to be a little bit of a more complex solution,
Okay, so we could accept one last question.
Yes.
And then
Thank you. So we've been talking about how we quantify sleep quality and sleep disorders using data during the night. But since sleep affects also our daytime life, I was wondering what's the potential of using daytime data for recognizing sleep disorders or sleep deprivation or even just sleep quality? Can we use any of the wearables that you have presented or even just normal EEG data?
Absolutely, great question. So what can we use during the day? And I think that's something I'm advocating quite a bit. So I would recommend you go to MIT Media Lab. They have some stuff that's published there with smartphone usage. You can think about reaction times. You can think about spelling mistakes. You can think about emoticon usage. You can think about communication protocols. There's lots of things that it's a nice window into it. So there's nothing that I'm aware of on the market today that allows you to do something that is doing it, but I do think you will see that. It's a natural extension to go because as one of my core theses, we sleep in order to be awake, and by awake we mean high quality, present-minded, attention. And so there's lots of ways to measure attention. If you really go far out and you want me to speculate, I do think that you'll see wearables that are going to be decoding more than just things on your phone. I think Emmanuel is doing a good job of reminding us about non-contact sensors. There's just we're living in a world that's just got ambient computing. It's coming, and ubiquitous computing is another growing trend. And so with that, you might imagine sort of a constellation of devices and constellations of data streams that could get processed that give you even more information about how you are behaving during the day. That again comes back to the night. And so I think when somebody can connect those two things, that's when we'll be in a good space, because consumer behavior is very hard to change. But if you can close that loop and do these slight tweaks, maybe even your Nest thermostat changes its temperature, that enhances your deep sleep. Those will be the type of things when I think we'll be in a much better place for sleep.
And sometimes I think that it's during our wake, so we should trust our own feeling about how well we feel, instead of trusting a lot of these sensors, in my opinion.
Yes. Actually, as a sleep doctor, I mean, how do we define sleep, healthy sleep, which is really when people sleep enough to be rested during the day. That's pretty much what we consider healthy sleep. And a lot of insomnia is a behavioral problem where people actually are almost over-worried about not sleeping enough. And one of the key of cognitive behavioral therapy is actually to reduce a little bit sleep so that it becomes more dense and people kind of relearn to sleep. So in fact, what you hear in the media is very detrimental, because we hear a lot about these books that say, if you don't sleep, you're going to die and you develop Alzheimer's disease. And obviously, it's a bit of an exaggerated claim, and that scares people. So they say, my God, doctor, I only sleep 9 hours. Am I going to die tomorrow? But we see these patients, but they're great because they're very easy to treat. You tell them just sleep 7 hours and leave me alone, But,
and also we are in Silicon Valley, right? We like all these gadgets.
So I think the over-focus, we have to be cautious. But on the other side, it's an incredible opportunity to monitor normal health when you're doing nothing. When you're sleeping, you're doing nothing. You're just, so that, for example, brain waves are uncontaminated by sensory input. When you're moving, there's a lot of artifact, you're thinking, etc. When you're sleeping, you go through a kind of an automatic program, and we know that that automatic program is disturbed early in a lot of problems, like, for example, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer, So I think there will be biomarkers, maybe even depression, that we will find by analyzing more carefully the sleep data that will have some direct predictive value for intervening early to improving the health, both mental and physical, of a lot of people.
Okay, so I think we thank for our wonderful speakers, and we will end this session on sleep. Hopefully tonight you have a good night of sleep.